Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Anarelli with Yash Solutions. We appreciate you joining our webinar this morning. Today we have with us our CTO at Yash Solutions, Ashish Nanotar. We also have Red Hat uh, Mike Beaton and Mark Walker with us. Sorry about that. But today I thought I would provide a quick snapshot of what we're going to be providing, an overview of who we are at Yash Solutions. Uh, we'll be turning it over to the Red Hat team to talk about Ansible Tower, and then we'll be circling back with Ashish Nanotar that will be providing a demo of Yash 1, highlighting our AI solution and how that integrates with Ansible Tower. A little background on Yash Solutions. We are fully integrated with Red Hat. We are an SIV partner with a certified solution that is in the container program. You can reach that at the Red Hat container portal. And the product that we have is called Yash 1, which we'll be showing a little later. So some of the areas that we work with clients are going to be around subscriptions. We provide workshops that can be on site or done virtually. And then we also can provide delivery and professional services around Red Hat products. So feel free to reach out to us after the webinar if you have any questions in those areas. And then lastly, we'll show you where you can find our product Yash 1 in the Red Hat container catalog on the next slide. There we go. So here you can see an overview of our product and the capabilities of Yash 1 along with the AI integration that you can review later. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Red Hat, and they can talk a little bit about Ansible Tower.
Hey, thanks, John, and thanks, Ashish. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Beaton, and I am the Marketing Resource Manager here at Red Hat for the Red Hat Ready program, of which Yash Solutions is in our partner program. If you're not entirely familiar with Red Hat, we are a multinational open source software company founded in 1993. Some might say we are largely associated with our enterprise operating system, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but we are much more than that, as you can see here. We have a variety of products to solve each one of your pain points, whether it's in storage, virtualization, cloud, mobile, even middleware. We really pride ourselves on leveraging the open source community to continue to bring our customers, such as yourselves, bleeding edge products in a variety of different markets. As far as who's using our software, we have a pretty equal spread across multiple verticals globally. We feel very fortunate that the leaders in a variety of sectors are choosing to use Red Hat solutions to help run their businesses, including over 90% of healthcare companies, airlines, commercial banks, telcos, US exec departments in the Fortune 500. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you have any questions, you can kind of see on the right side of your screen, there's a Q&A box there. Some of the simpler questions we'll be answering live, and then some of the more in-depth questions we'll wait to the end of the session. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Mark Walker, Solutions Architect for the Red Hat Ready program. Mark?
Oh, sorry, we're just switching the headphones over. Hi, I'm Mark Walker here. I'm the Red Hat Ready Partner Program Solutions Architect, and I'll be doing the initial conversation around our Ansible offering. And just to give you a little bit of background, I've been in the business for a while. This is my 33rd year as an enterprise architect and developer. I took on this role about 2 years ago, and Ansible is one of the first products I was exposed to, and basically it blew my mind in terms of its capabilities and what it could do. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And to do that, really the best way for us to do it is to really talk about you, to talk about how people are doing their IT business, how they run their infrastructures, and where their problems are. So regardless of what you do in IT, so regardless of whether you're dealing with your operations environment, provisioning bare metal infrastructure, managing your change configuration management within that, in those environments, whether you're talking about your DevOps, how you deliver the software that you build into from dev into your QA and into your production environments, or how you manage and configure your networking, we all share, and all of these activities share certain common problems. They usually involve way too many manual activities. That's where you're actually typing in the configuration or changes, or running configuration files where you're passing parameters, resulting in way too many errors. that you'll encounter as an organization, and way too many things that can't be repeated, where you end up with what we call snowflakes, little environments that are different from each other. We have a technical term that we use, we call them pets, where each environment ends up having its own special configuration and that you can't reproduce one environment from the next environment. And that type of problem and the problems that it introduces makes IT complicated. It makes it so that you cannot deliver repeatably the same solution over and over again. It means that you're spending all of your time fixing the problems of things that have happened somewhere in your environment and you can't debug those problems. And it makes it hard for you to repeat what you want to do in your organization and save yourselves money by not having to redo things over and over again. It's this whole conversation around pets versus cattle. And if you want to know what I mean when I talk about pets, pets are things that you have to individualize. You give each one an individual name. You treat it as a special thing that you have to take care of and manage. Cattle are where you treat all of your environments as very similar things that you literally can roll out and repeat. And if something dies and goes away, you just spin up another one and you're off and running. You don't have to do anything special with it. So when we think about modern IT, we're really talking about our complexity problem and the fact that in most IT organizations, we're dealing with a large complexity of infrastructure where we're dealing with multiple silos. That's different things you're running, different environments, and that could be some stuff running on your Windows platform, some stuff running on a Linux platform, an AIX platform, a Solaris platform, a Unix platform. You have some stuff running with your Android devices, your IoT stuff. You've got multiple networking switches and things that you're working with, all of which need their own special language or tools or configuration. IT is complicated. On top of that, you have to make all of these things work together. And so you have to come up with ways to bridge how your different components work. You deploy an application. It's not just about deploying an application. It's about setting up the networking configuration for that application. It's about configuring and provisioning the servers that it goes on. It's about setting up the firewall rules. It's about getting the security infrastructure set up in terms of your certificates and your keys and all the things that you do. Setting up infrastructure is not a simple thing. Repeating what you set up in infrastructure is even a less simple thing. And repeating it without errors is even a less simple thing on top of that. Built into that is the fact that people are trying to support, and by the way, I apologize ahead of time for how fast I go. I only have one speed, it's fast, but hopefully it'll allow us to get through this information. It'll be interesting as we go. When we're talking about this complexity program, we also have to deal with the fact that as an organization, we have to deal with the fact that we cannot keep the right people all the time. As systems age out, say for supporting older AIX-based systems or older Solaris systems, or we have a group of administrators who have the original skills, well, they're all retiring, or people move on from organization to organization, and with them goes the knowledge and skills. So in order to be able to continue to maintain all of my existing infrastructure while supporting new infrastructure as it comes out becomes an ever more complicated problem for organizations. And one of the ways that we need to be able to address that is through automation. The fact is we can take those skills and tools that an administrator has and we can lock those into an automated type of infrastructure where we're not keeping it, pulling it out of the administrator's mind every time they do something. We've recorded what they're capable of doing in a way that we can reuse it and reproduce it on demand. The fact that we don't have that ability to have the continuity with all of our administrators, the fact that we do have that heterogeneity in our systems, all different systems that we have to manage and maintain, basically means that we're going to have, as our environments get more and more complicated, ever more problems to have to deal with, ever more drift, we call it configuration drift, entering into our systems, making it ever more complicated and more expensive to maintain what we have, let alone giving us the flexibility and the time to do new things. So what can we do about it? Well, we already know that there are certain things that are happening in the automation world that can improve the way organizations work. There are immediate paybacks to doing automation, to basically reproducing what you do in an organization as an automated tool as opposed to a hands-on tool. And these have resulted in measurable numbers. So for example, when we talk about a highly automated organization, that's really what we're talking about here, low automation or high automation organizations. We find that those that do a lot of automation end up being able to do 33% more with the configuration management. They basically are higher performing at 20% more for testing, 30% more in their deployment area, and 27% more improvement in their change referral process. The real numbers, the numbers that make more sense, are here. we actually have been able to measure, and this was done with a bunch of companies that we looked at in terms of what they were doing for automation, and we found out that those high performance DevOps teams, specifically in this case, were able to do 46 times as many code deployments. And that's huge. If you want to have a true CI/CD DevOps environment, it's the ability to literally make a change to code today and have it in production today. They're able to do 440 times faster time from when you actually do your commit to deploy, because it's automated. When I check in my code, it actually goes through all the processes, does all the testing, the environments are built and deployed. I don't have to redo that every 6 weeks or every 6 months like I would with a traditional model. I was able to do much faster recovery from downtime because everything's automated, even the rollback is automated. So automation can really do a lot of things to help organizations be better, be faster, and have fewer errors. So overall, that means that high-performing teams spend 50% less of their time on unnecessary redo. So essentially going back and redoing the things that failed because they didn't work right. And that allows them to spend 66% more of their time doing the new stuff, taking on the new jobs, actually solving problems that your business has, as opposed to just trying to keep the things that you're doing running. So how does it happen? Well, automation basically lets smart people do work smarter. I don't have to have my individual administrators redoing the things they do every day, which is silly, because if it's something that can be automated, it should be automated. I should never have an administrator doing anything that can be run from a command line as a script. Unless it's specifically a new research or new things that we've never done before, everything that we should do in our organization should be automated. The more we can do to reduce human decision-making for standard processes, the less problems we're going to have, the less configuration drift we're going to have, and the more stable our environments will be, the more predictable our environments will be, and the more time we'll have available to do new stuff. So we all know that automation works. Everybody's got an idea about automation. The real problem is what do we mean by automation and what can we use for? And this is where it gets complicated, because typically for every platform, for AIX, for Unix, for Linux, for Windows, they have their own product-specific automation tools. For every development environment, Java, .NET, COBOL, IMS, whatever you're doing, they have their own tools that you would use for automation. For every networking platform, whether it's Juniper or F5 or Cisco, they all have their own languages. Some of them have multiple languages within the same company that you have to use. For every where you run your software, whether it's in Red Hat virtualization or VMware or Hyper-V, whether it's in the cloud in Azure or Amazon or Google or on an OpenStack platform, you have another set of tools that you would use for automation and configuring, managing your configuration of these environments. So for an organization, and most organizations have had to do this over an evolution of time, which means that you have the tools that you were using in IBM with your IBM hardware when you had it, say Maestro, and you had the tools you were using with your Microsoft environments, your PowerShell and whatever you were using there. You have the tools you're using in your Linux environment, Bash or KSH or Python or whatever it is, or maybe you're using some Salt and maybe you're using some Puppet or some Chef or whatever it is that you're using. There are a lot of options out there. And finding a tool is not normally just a matter of saying, okay, we're going to pick one tool and use it everywhere, or hasn't been in the past. Instead, what ends up happening is, we're going to use Salt over here for our bare metal provisioning, and up here we're going to use Puppet to do our DevOps stuff, and over here we're going to use some KSH for some of this networking, and we'll use some PowerShell for this other networking stuff we're doing over here. And what you end up with is having your automation infrastructure be just as complicated as your data infrastructure, which is not sustainable. There has to be a better way. There has to be something that we can use that doesn't require a different tool for every single thing that we do. Now, obviously, we want to avoid what we would call the Oracle Golden Hammer, where we're trying to use one tool for everything, unless there's a tool that's appropriate for that. And that's where we talk about our product. So how do you pick the right automation tool? Well, there are some key considerations I consider when I was doing a lot of this, and that's basically, will the tool work on all my platforms? Is it as common as possible? So I want to use as few tools as possible so I don't have to develop 100 different skills in order to do it. Will that tool work outside of just my bare metal provisioning and my operations or my DevOps? Can I use it for managing my network configuration? Because there really hasn't been any good tools for that, and the ones that are out there are very specific. And I'm trying to find the best fit here. Will the tool actually work in all of my environments, whether it's in the cloud, in my virtual machines, as well as on my bare metal? Does the tool provide support for the different software and hardware that I use, or do I have to come up with a custom configuration for everything? So can I use it with my JBoss infrastructure and with my Oracle database? Can I use it to manage my Red Hat registrations and also maybe to deploy my Office 365 clients? Where does it fit? How much does it actually do as part of that? Or do I have to write all of that for myself? Does it need a client on every machine? So do I have to manage the deployment of clients or any special security and configuration on all the different things that are going to be managed by whatever configuration change management automation tool that I'm going to work with? And how much is it going to cost is obviously a huge factor in terms of deciding what tools I'm going to use as part of it. And then can I actually use it around what I've already built? Because that's another problem. As an organization, we've already invested hundreds or thousands or millions of dollars in some automation in the individual silos on our AIX platforms, on our Unix platforms, on our Linux platforms, for our DevOps, for our networking, or whatever. Can I actually use whatever tool I'm bringing in to wrap that existing stuff so I don't have to rewrite it from scratch until I'm ready to? And can it be used easily to both convey the information about what it's trying to automate, so that I can show, for example, an automation script to a manager who understands what it's doing, or share it between a networking guy and an operations guy and a DevOps team so they can understand what's doing? And can I actually have those domain experts, my networking guy who isn't a developer, actually write the automation required to automate their networking without having to be a programmer? And those are all powerful things that we have to be aware of, because all of those would limit or constrain us in some way in terms of how we can implement automation and how effective it would be in our organization. So what is our answer? Well, the answer at Red Hat is Ansible. And there's a number of reasons for that, but let's first talk about what Ansible is. So Ansible at its core is what we call the Red Hat Ansible engine. And I'm going to get into that in more detail in a minute, but essentially it's a command line tool that you would use to run Ansible playbooks to accomplish things, to automate the things that you want to accomplish. And it's the part that's part of everything. So when we talk about Ansible Tower, we're really talking about an operationalization layer that sits on top of our Ansible engine. So what it does is it provides a web interface that allows you to have any user come along and select the different things that they want to run, the Ansible playbooks they want to run, and you can set up different orchestration parts around it. So it does not just one thing, but 10 things that you can set it up for role-based authorization, so that certain users can request certain activities be done, including in a management of approval process. There's a lot of things you can do around Ansible once you have your Ansible playbooks. So our Ansible Tower is our way to operationalize and make available to everybody all of the things that we've been able to automate with Ansible playbooks. And then we have a special version of Ansible for support around the networking. And that's for companies that have huge networking or complicated networking infrastructures and want to get support for managing those infrastructures using our Ansible product. So what is Ansible? At its heart, it's a super simple way to do automation. I always like to tell the story. When my last job that I worked on before I got into this role involved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of servers, and it ended up taking 3.5 years to automate everything. And so one of the first things when I got into this role as an SA here is they told me to take a look at Ansible. And I have a Kubernetes environment that I set up, which is a whole bunch of these nodes that I've got some Gluster installed on a bunch of other products. And I sat down and I wrote the Ansible playbook to provision it. And it was like 27.5 pages or longer. Was really, really clunky. And I'm going, this Ansible, I don't understand Ansible. Why would anybody use this? It's too complicated. And then I was sent to a workshop to teach how to teach our partners how to use Ansible. And I'm sitting there beside an Ansible guru, and like really, really smart guy. And he looked at what I did, and I'm complaining about Ansible, and he says, what the heck were you doing? And it took me 3.5 weeks to write the Ansible playbooks. He rewrote it in about a half an hour, and it was 1.5 pages. And what he taught me was that I was trying to think of Ansible as a programming tool, and it's not. It's a state machine. So the cool part about Ansible is you're not describing how to roll out 100 servers. You're describing what you want the servers to look like when it's all said and done. And when you get that about Ansible, when you understand its simplicity, when you understand that it's basically you describing what you want the environment to look like when it's done, then you truly understand the power of Ansible. And the fact that you can do that in this YAML-like English-like language called a YAML playbook, and you can show that playbook to anybody. You know, I can teach anybody to read a YAML playbook in about 5 minutes, and I can teach anybody to write a basic YAML playbook in about 15 minutes, that you truly get to understand the power and the simplicity of that thing that is Ansible. And because it actually runs from a single server and logs in and does all the things on other servers, it means that you don't need special agents to go anywhere on all your different servers. And it means that you can do anything on a remote server that you could do if you were sitting in front of that remote server, which gives you true power. So that's all built around the Ansible engine. And what is the Ansible engine? Well, it's automation supported. It's based on the Ansible community project, which is upstream. And it's unusual in that for Red Hat, our Ansible engine, the supported version, is exactly the same as our upstream project. And that's done intentionally. It gives, with our Ansible engine support, you get the 24/7 or 8x5 support on all of our modules. It includes all the tools that you need to work with it, and it includes all the benefits of a Red Hat subscription, including that support we were talking about, the fact that we make it ready, hardened, enterprise ready for you, that we ensure that the software you're getting is ready to go in an enterprise level, and that we provide support around it. And if you use Ansible, what we often recommend is that you basically use it, just play with it, learn it, and then when you're ready for support for it, or using it in a production environment, that's when you'd look at subscribing to Ansible Engine. So what is Ansible Engine at its core? And this is the core of Ansible itself. Essentially, it's this automation engine, and it uses something called an inventory. And the inventory can be a dynamic inventory, but it's basically a list and a grouping of your servers and the information around your servers. So you could have an entry underneath it called Tomcat servers, or a thing around a web server, or an entry for database servers, or whatever categorization you want, with a list of all the servers below that. And then that way, when you want to do a command, you could do a command and apply it to all your servers or just to your web servers. And essentially that's what it's going to do. What it runs are these things called Ansible playbooks. So Ansible playbooks, and we're going to look at one in a second, it's just a description of what you want the environment to look like when the playbook is done running. And when you look at it, you'll be surprised at how simple it is. And those playbooks actually cause modules to run. So what you see are that thing called modules. Well, modules are actual code that you would write that would run on the servers. And there are literally 2,600 modules, I think now. When I started, there were about 600. Now there's 2,600. That's only been 2 years. That's how fast it's growing. And there are now modules for virtually everything that you can imagine, whether it's managing networking configuration or Red Hat subscriptions, managing some Windows stuff, managing your Azure or your Amazon stuff. There are modules to do all kinds of things. And modules, because it's open source, can be written by you. And when you write a module, you don't have to know a specific language like Ruby, like you would have to know for Puppet or Chef or Salt. In effect, you can use any interpreted language supported on the platforms that you're going to be managing. So that means that for Windows, you can use essentially PowerShell, or you can use .NET as part of it, as long as that's what's supported on the machine that you're doing the target against. So it gives you incredible power and flexibility around it. And then for special devices like networks, in terms of being able to configure those, or to talk to third-party applications like Service Desk Now, there's this concept of plugins, which you can also write yourself, but there's also many plugins that are provided as part of what we do, or provided by vendors when you bring in hardware to work with Ansible. So this simple diagram represents all that basically covers the core of what Ansible is. The users will create playbooks to do things. Those playbooks will call modules against the servers that are in the inventory file. And at its heart, that's a perfect description of what Ansible engine is and what Ansible does. And it does it with this concept of a playbook. So I'm going to show you right here that what you see is a playbook that will deploy HTTP server, Apache server, onto all of the servers that are grouped under, well, in this case, all servers. And it's going to configure them to run on port 80 with a maximum client of 200. So it's going to actually change the httpd.conf file to modify those two entries. So that first part describes where it's acting and what the variables are that's going to use it. That it's going to use. And then the remote user describes how it's going to use it. So who is it logging onto that remote server as? And so in this case, we're telling it to do it as root. Underneath it, we have the tasks. These are the things that it's going to do. And for each task, you're essentially describing a module. So the name is nothing. It's just for reporting and to come out in the log files. But underneath that, we're using the yum module. So we know that it's going to be using yum. We want it to install the package HTTPD, and we want it to have it as the latest version. So when it's done, we need to have the HTTPD package installed, and we need it to be at the latest release. Underneath that, the next task that we're going to have it do is we're going to have it change the configuration file. So under the hood, Ansible uses something called Jinja 2. It's a templating language. It's incredibly powerful, and if you use all the power with Ansible, you're using it wrong. Because what you really need to do is essentially take those variables like that HTTP underscore ports and put the curly braces around it and stuff it where you want that value to go in the original httpd.conf file and name it to a J2 file, so it's a Jinja2 template, and you're done. You've just created a fully configurable, dynamically configurable template for doing your http.conf file. It's that simple. So that's what that second one does, is it'll actually change it on the fly and write it over and replace it in the directory for you. And then the third step is we're actually going to use the service template or the service module, and we're telling it that we want HTTP to be in a running state. So this simple YAML playbook will install, configure, and start repeatedly HTTPD or HTTP on multiple servers. In fact, in this case, every server for us, and make sure it's running and report back when it doesn't and retry. And it can do a lot of this concurrently. So I can do many servers at exactly the same time. So as a basic example, and can get a lot more than this, there are things called Ansible roles that can do hundreds of things at the same time or thousands, it's up to you. But at the heart of it, this is what Ansible is. It's simplicity in a nutshell. It changes all the other ways we've ever considered doing automation and throws them out the window. Changes automation from being a programming task to be a describing an end state task, which is everything. That changes the game in terms of automation and making things simple and manageable. And you can see, just looking at this, how I could convey this information easily between my DevOps team, my operations team, my networking team, even my management team. And when you start to automate business processes as well, you can even see how you could use this to explain what you're doing to your business team. So people who don't have specific technical domain knowledge, but have business domain knowledge. So there's huge power here. So just to give you an idea, this shot of modules was done literally 2.5 years ago. Since then, there are now 5 times as many modules as what you see on the screen that do all the different things you can do. And I just did a couple of breakouts here. So one is for the ASA, which shows you there's a module for doing configuration around your Cisco ASA devices. There's another module for doing managing your Red Hat subscriptions, to register your servers and to manage the different things that you're going to install on your software. Just as an example of how much is out there. The Ansible Galaxy is huge, and the number of roles that there are for different things that you would do basically mean that chances are, if somebody hasn't developed it today to do something that you need to do that wasn't in the Ansible modules, and probably is, then there will be, and if you have suggestions as a subscribed Ansible user with Red Hat, you can actually put in a support ticket about things you want, and we can go out there and see if there's things that are working or that things that are kind of working what you do, and we'll work with the community to address any concerns you have, any problems you have, and essentially request new functionality around modules that we don't own, or add new functionality around modules we do own. Oh, should be going next one. So, and so I've mentioned this before, once you have your YAML playbooks written and you have your infrastructure designed the way you want it to do, the automation you want it to do, at a certain point, you don't want to have to be able to call up, write up a ticket, and have an administrator actually go in and just run an Ansible playbook. That's not what you're paying them for. You're paying them to solve problems. Instead, you just offer those playbooks up in Ansible Tower. So Ansible Tower provides you a really cool tool for operationalizing what you do. It does a lot more than that, and you'll see that in the demo at the end of the presentation. But essentially, it provides you a way that you can stand up a self-service environment to manage your infrastructure with your Ansible playbooks in Ansible Tower, while keeping track of everything everybody does, controlling who has access to things, doing complex orchestration if tasks involve many different things that has to happen, installing approval processes if you need, integrating with Service Desk Now and other help desks, working with our Insights product to actually provide active management of your Red Hat infrastructure, and providing metrics and measuring tools that you can use to figure out what's happening where in your environment, and to be able to manage change configuration and in fact manage your drift as well. So you can constantly be looking at what's happening on your servers to see if they're changing. So it gives you the ability to provide a big overview over everything that you're managing in your infrastructure. And since Ansible is the first product in forever that can really work with your entire infrastructure, from your DevOps to your networking to your operations. It'll provide you with a single interface that you can use to bring in all that information from all of these environments and to manage your configuration in a single tool. So how does automation work with Ansible Tower? Well, it's really built on the playbooks. So at the very core of it underneath, you're going to have your playbooks that will run, and then you configure them and put them together inside of Ansible Tower to do the different steps that you want to do. And you literally will have Ansible Tower prompt and provide forms to fill in the information that would normally be filled in the command line, and basically use it to automate the provisioning of your infrastructure. And you're going to get that in a demo here shortly. But it's all built on top of Ansible, the engine. And then in addition to that Tower, we have our Ansible engine for networking. And essentially that's an extra set of support on top of Ansible built around networking appliances, because we know that a lot of organizations, because Ansible is the first product that actually lets me really source control my networking configuration, a lot of organizations are jumping on board to use Ansible for automation. And that requires specialized skills about the domain knowledge of the specific networking switches and devices that organizations are using. So this is support not just for Ansible and its basic modules. This is support for Ansible and its modules and the plugins and what they do with specific networking products. And now almost all the major vendors are involved with this, from Cisco to Juniper to F5 and so on. So what are the operational use cases, or what are the use cases for Ansible? It really falls under 3 categories, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because, like I said, you're going to get into this demo here shortly. But essentially, we have the operations use case. That's your basic infrastructure management configuration tool. So that's provisioning new servers from the bare metal, or provisioning new servers in your VMware or your Hyper-V or your Red Hat virtualization environment. That's provisioning new servers or new environments up in the cloud, whether it's Amazon or Azure or Google. That's doing configuration on those environments, installing software in those environments repeatedly, checking the environments to make sure they haven't changed, making sure the environments are patched at the right level, making sure that the right RPMs are applied, and doing those activities. So at an operations use case, you actually use it to manage your configuration. You can use it for your operations management to repeatedly roll out environments. You can use it for provisioning of your environments and to manage the costs around those environments. You can use it for the delivery for CI/CD environments. So Ansible comes with modules for working with Jenkins, for example. So you can actually use it there. It's actually got a replacement that'll sit on top of a Puppet infrastructure and replace the master mode, the master head for that. It's got the ability to work with Service Desk now. So you can essentially set up Ansible in such a way that if a user checks in code, it can be picked up, built with Jenkins, a new environment provisioned, that software delivered into that environment, that's spun up and tested, and then smoke tested and whatever else you're going to do. And all of that can be either managed by Ansible or by, say, Jenkins calling Ansible. It can work on both sides of that coin. And it can be used to enforce security and compliance to make sure you're patched at the right level. And obviously it can be used for complex orchestration. So if I have a bunch of individual tasks, install a web server, install a database server, configure a database, port the data, and I want to put them all together as a single task, I can use Ansible to provide that level of complexity, orchestration around that level of complexity. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that Ansible has, and this is 2 years ago, so this is already out of date. I've got to go back and revise it because there are hundreds of new ones now. Essentially, there are integrations with everything from Amazon to Azure and Google, all the way over to chat tools and monitoring tools like NetApp or Stackdriver or Logic Monitor and so on. So what are the networking use cases? Well, this is one of the first tools, and again, we've already talked about this. Ansible now has the ability using plugins and the same kind of login capability that it can do everywhere else. And Ansible will work anywhere you can do an SSH login to basically manage your networking configuration, to pull the networking configuration down so you have it, you can source control it, and actually allow you to push changes up into your configuration, or push your configuration changes up to the networking devices and appliances. So that gives you the ability to do proper configuration management with your networking infrastructure. It gives you the ability to do it from a centralized place as opposed to having to go to each of your different places to work with it. It gives you the ability to do provisioning of your software-defined networking or network function virtualization appliances, so you can use it for that. And it gives you the ability to do your patching and your security configuration on all of your networking infrastructure, and to check to make sure that it is compliant and that it is patched and that it is updated and secured. And it gives you the ability to do that in a complicated way. So think about it. for the first time, if I do a rollout of a complex JEE application, which isn't one that can be easily deployed, where I have to deploy a database, I have to deploy my web application servers, my web servers, my HA proxy in front of it, where I have to make my networking rule changes in terms of my firewall, in terms of my routing, all of that stuff I could now put together as a single Ansible set of tasks that I could use and have it orchestrate that entire thing so it either all works or it all fails. And that can be done with one tool now, Ansible. So just to give you an idea of some of the organizations that have stepped on board, and again, this is even growing beyond this now. We have everything from Juniper to A10 to Citrix and so on. All of them have now started developing the modules that allow you to use Ansible, the modules and plugins, to manage their appliances. It's gotten so big now that we've been told that Starbucks, for example, won't allow a single networking appliance on any of their premises unless they come with the Ansible modules to support them, because they're doing everything with Ansible now. It just gives you an idea of just how powerful and how pervasive Ansible is becoming. I always like to bring this up. Red Hat is one of the fastest growing, Red Hat Enterprise Linux was one of the fastest growing products people had ever seen. And Red Hat Ansible now is Red Hat's fastest growing product. And we haven't seen any other product grow as fast as Ansible has, except for our Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Just to give you an idea of how powerful it is and how many people have come on board. We like to say that there was an automation wars that's been happening for years. Well, the automation wars are over, Ansible is one. So where else can we use it? And I talked about this earlier in your CI/CD, your DevOps, actually deploying and managing the deployment of your code, whether it's on premise, in a hybrid cloud, or in the cloud. You can use Ansible as any part of that solution. So everything from provisioning the environments to actually deploying the code. You can use it as a wrapper around Jenkins or have Jenkins wrap around Ansible. But essentially, you can use Ansible as a tool that makes and puts all the different disparate pieces together to give you a seamless, continuous integration experience. And it can do that with the same things: configuration management, the actual application deployment itself, the provisioning of the environments, and it can do that as part of a CI/CD. So whether you drive it because of an event, a pipeline event happens in GitHub, or because you're actually having something else trigger it, like a service desk now or Jira or some other thing make it happen, you can make that all part of your continuous integration environment where it's happened automatically without human intervention. And we actually have some really cool webinars that we've done at part of summit presentations where we actually show some of this really amazing provisioning that you can do with Ansible. And again, you can also use it to check to make sure you're using the latest patches, the latest software, the latest RPMs for the software that you're deploying, so that it's compliant. And then finally, because it can deal with all these environments, it can do it as a multiple, very complex orchestration engine to basically take all the different things together, whether it's your environments or your software development or your patching, whatever, and make it one continuous workflow. So, and just an example of some of the tools that are integrated with Ansible, and this is by no means a full list. Again, this is a 2-year-old slide. We have everything from GitHub to New Relic, your Logic Monitor, App Dynamics, and so on. So why Red Hat Ansible specifically? Well, Red Hat owns the upstream project, so we have a strong ability to influence where that product goes and making sure that it meets our customers' needs. So making sure that if you have concerns or problems and you want to see some functionality, either we know to do it or we know the people that own the upstream modules, and we can work with them to make sure that functionality is in there to help any problems you may have. So if you're using Ansible on your own as open source, and the module doesn't work right, or there's a defect in it, you have to go and find the owner of that module. You would have to work with them to fix it, and they would have to have a reason to work with you. With Red Hat, if you have a module, even if Red Hat doesn't own it, we will act as a broker for you to work with the upstream owner of the project that has that particular module in it that you need to have addressed or changed or fixed or updated or patched to see about what we can do to get that included for you. We also make sure that whatever gets deployed into Ansible is enterprise ready, and that it's hardened and that it's secure, and that you can use it effectively. The same thing we do in all of our subscriptions, because remember, with Red Hat, you're not really buying the software, you're buying the support for the software, and that's really what we're giving you. And we do that by doing a minor release every few months, and we do a major release every 3 to 4 minor releases to make sure you have the latest functionality, and that gives you the assurance that you're knowing you're having rock solid enterprise ready software, but you're getting the amazing dynamicism of working with open source, where there's a lot of new functionality, a lot of new ideas. Ansible is one of the most active projects and has been for quite a while of all of the open source projects that are out there. So it tells you that a lot of people in there contributing and providing a lot of new value all the time to Ansible that we'll make available to you. And then Red Hat itself is responsible for basically supporting our customers, ensuring that any of the modules that we use or any of the modules that are used by our software are supported in some way. Now, if we didn't write it, it's a best effort case, but we will make that best effort. Red Hat has a reputation of making software boring. And we do that because we're really an engineering company, and that's what we believe in. It's our job to make sure that what you bring in from Red Hat into your organization is ready for your organization. So just to give you an idea of some of the people who have adopted Ansible wholeheartedly and are using it to manage their infrastructure across the board, you can see that it's not a little thing. We have everything from Sprint to NASA to Warner Brothers, from Verizon to Google. A lot of companies are now using Ansible Tower as a way to do their orchestration, to do their automation, and they're using it for a reason, because it's the one product that can work across the board for all of their different needs, whether it's DevOps, networking, or operations, across all of their environments, whether it's their cloud or their on-premise, whether it's their Unix or their Linux or their Windows environments. We now have a single tool that can do all of that. So what is it, the Ansible way? Well, the Ansible way is it's cross-platform support. So it works on any environment. You can do an SSH login, or for which we have a module, and there are many, or a plugin. It's based on the human-readable YAML format document. And you saw it, it's incredibly simple, and it's an incredibly easy way to describe how you want your environment to look at the end without having to worry about how it's going to happen. That's not your job. Your job is to describe what you want your environment to look like. And as such, because it's a state machine, not a programming machine, it's a perfect way to describe your environment. That YAML playbook can be source controlled, and that YAML playbook literally is a snapshot of what your environment looks like. So you're not just describing what you want your environment to look like, you're documenting it. And because of that, and because YAML is a text-like language, it can be source controlled. And that means it can be compared with previous versions. You can roll back and roll forward based on the playbook. It just gives you all the flexibility of a non-programming language way to do your automation that you would not get when you're trying to write custom automation scripts. And because it can be used with dynamic inventories, it can integrate directly into what you're doing now. So most organizations already have some way to keep track of all of their servers. You can actually use the API to wrap any custom stuff that you've done, and there are also plugins for working with most of the paid for dynamic inventory systems that are out there. It is designed from the beginning by an open source community to basically be open source, to work with everybody effectively. So there are tools that it does. It doesn't try to replace Puppet, it can wrap Puppet. It doesn't necessarily try to do everything for everybody. You can take advantage of other things that you're already doing, or you can use it with the existing tools. It just provides you a product that can work with everything well. And it does that by, basically this language of DevOps. So this is kind of a repeat of all the stuff I've already been saying, but essentially think about what that YAML playbook looked like, and think about how easy it would be to have a document like that you could put in front of your operations guys as a development team and say, this is what we need the environment to look like. And then go to the networking guy and say, this is what we need our networking configuration to have. And the networking guys could write it in a playbook, and everybody could look at it, and everybody could agree on what that's what the environment's supposed to look like in the end, as opposed to writing out these very formal requests where the paper that has on it what you're requesting doesn't necessarily match what's implemented. Instead, the paper that's describing what you're actually implementing is the paper you use to implement it. That's your YAML playbook. It just gives you a real whole new way of doing your administration of your organization, of your IT infrastructure. And so what is its impact? And these are measured impacts, actual studies. And essentially what happens is your teams get more productive. They eliminate tasks, they eliminate problems, and it makes people happier. They're not wasting time doing make ready work or basically the day-to-day mundane tasks that should have been automated. From an enterprise's perspective, that means that you can get a handle on the complexity in your organization. You can start to predict how long things take to happen, and predict that they are going to happen, as opposed to worrying every time a new deployment happens whether your environment will have to be rolled back or not. It gives you, as a result, more resources for doing innovation, more abilities to keep track of what you're actually accomplishing and doing. And with Ansible Tower, you can actually keep track of exactly what your administration teams are doing. And it basically produces an organization that expects things to work, as opposed to having what most organizations have, which is an expectation that things will fail with a hope that they'll work. And so what we can talk about is there's actually a number of case studies we can provide you where companies have gone through and have agreed to have case studies written about them, where they've made huge inroads in terms of managing their complexity, in terms of automating their infrastructure. And we use as examples, for example, JCrew, NEC, and Riot Games. If you're interested, we can send you the actual case studies that have been built around these organizations explaining how it's helped them. And just so you understand, Ansible is huge in the open source community. It's got a very heavy adoption. Red Hat's actually integrating it with all of our products because we see its value, and a lot of other organizations are as well. Think of the networking companies. And to support that and that community, there's a lot out there. So we have the ansible.com website that has actual free training and courses that you can have a look at that will introduce the stuff to you. There's videos, there's free books that you can get. We have like I said, thousands of GitHub contributors to the Ansible project who are constantly adding new modules, new features. That over 900 modules shipped with Ansible. It's now over 2,600 modules that have been shipped with Ansible. So it just shows you how active and dynamic the Ansible project is. So in a nutshell, Ansible is the automation set of tools and a framework and an API that you can use to manage your entire infrastructure, networking, operations, or cloud, and it provides, for the most part, all the pre-built modules you could ever imagine needing for an organization. And if it doesn't, you can actually write your own modules to do it. And you can actually even do anything you can do from the command line as part of what you do with Ansible. And it is extensively, widely supported open source project with a lot of dynamicism. So one of the things that we would normally do at this point is talk about our one day, but essentially at the end of this, we're going to do the demo that happens in the one day. So I'm going to skip kind of through this stuff and get to the point where we're going to have a QA and turn this over to our partners at Yash for the demo. Any questions?
Hello, Mark. This is John Anarelli at Yash Solutions. We thank you for the overview today of Ansible Tower and Ansible. It's quite an impressive technology, and we're very excited at Yash Solutions to be partnering with Red Hat and moving this out in the market. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashish Nanokar, our CTO at Yash Solutions, who will show a demo of Yash 1.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. And thanks, Mark, for leaving the webinar at such a high note. It only helps to show people more what actually Ansible can do along with things. When Mark was referring to the DevOps pipeline on the dev side of the house and also on the ops side of the house, that you can write a descriptive model, a description of how the infrastructure should look like and how we can automate it using Ansible Tower. All right. So Ansible runs behind everything. It is something, it's an utility, it's a smart software, Ansible engine. It picks up your description documents and creates your infrastructure according to that. And on top of it, when you bundle it with Ansible Tower, it only makes it even more powerful because you can see things the way nobody has seen before. You can see, you can run things, you can run ad hoc commands, you can see all of the reporting, and you can also automate Ansible remotely. That's a unique possibility that Red Hat Tower brings into picture. So here, while we were describing all of these things, and Mark was referring to the description documents, we are opening up our description documents up to the public so that you can try out things all by yourself in your infrastructure, on your systems, work on the POCs, get everything running cool. So this repository is called Yash Solutions/Ansible roles. It is tried and tested, and today's demo is based on the same description files called playbooks and the modules called roles that Ansible runs on. Here we have Ansible Tower. And Ansible Tower, like I said, helps automating everything. I'm just logging into Ansible Tower to show you how things would look like. Once on Ansible Tower, you get access to your projects. You can push the projects directly to the source code repository. You can version control it. You can see how many times your infrastructure has gone under the change and how it was looking days before, and today what is the drift that we have gone into. So all your evolution is properly versioned. You know everything about what is happening. You know everything about where to lead and whether your development environments are exactly the same as your production environments. So this is taking a little bit of time to load. Once that's up and running, I'll show you how things work with Yesh Solutions, Yesh1, powering up all of these things together. So here on Ansible Tower, you will see that there are a lot of options on the left-hand side. Like a dashboard would show you the snapshot of what's happening with your infrastructure. There are jobs that are running with Ansible. Okay, you can create templates, you can automate things, you can run multiple playbooks one by one as workflow using Ansible Tower. Okay, but today's demo here is really to show you that when you create a template and when you have some jobs, the power of Ansible Tower will let you create feedback loops as never before. With larger enterprises, you need your infrastructure to be responsive. You need your infrastructure to be responding to all the events. With Ansible powering all of these things, Ansible can control all of it. And with Ansible Tower, you can actually trigger Ansible remotely and complete the feedback loop. With Yesh1 behind the scenes, what Yesh1 would allow you to do is it would allow you to instantly listen to all the events. And when those events happen, you can decide what has to be done on those events specifically. So let's say on the screen, you see one of the Ansible jobs running. The Ansible jobs number that you would see is 101 Docker cleanup. That's one of the templates that we have created. And that template takes care of cleaning up the mess once the deployment has done. There would be some remnant Docker files and all those kind of things that are generated as part of the build process. And we would clean it up once the deployment has taken care of. So here with Yesh1, I'm going to log in into one, and I would show you how do we trigger the pipeline, and Ansible behind the scenes would run everything, okay, and make sure that your development environment is same as your testing environment and stage and production, and deploy to everything one by one. All the triggering is done by Ansible Tower, so that you don't need to actually provide access to your Ansible server, which is heart of your infrastructure. Okay, you can control who gets access, you can control who gets how much of access on it. So like here in this case, I have got some environments for the application that I'm going to show. There are three environments right now for the to-do app. One is QA, another one is stage at the top, okay, the top row, QA, stage, and production. So these three apps are currently running. All right, what if Ansible can help to spin up your infrastructure on demand and configure it just the way the other environments are in picture? All right, we can just show you how it works. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply create one more environment, okay, and trigger a pipeline for that. So right here, looking at the particular application and checking the deployments that are happening as a deployment pipeline. Here you would see all the jobs related to that particular application. All right, now let's trigger it. Let's trigger the pipeline and put Ansible to work. So sometimes people would say, what does Ansible bring into picture? Well, Ansible is a descriptive system, right? It is a description engine, like Mark already described. All you need to do is tell Ansible something, and Ansible would make sure that all of your infrastructure states are replicated as is, and it can also do it real time with Ansible Tower into picture. So just trigger it. I'll say, why not trigger a pipeline for my to-do application? By the way, what I'm doing here is triggering the AI engine for Yesh1. Yesh1 is AI-powered event and trigger-based mechanism that can listen to the events in your organization, in your infrastructure, whatever your people are doing with all the tools, and also Ansible. Okay, when it listens to all the events that are being generated by your web servers, your firewalls, your applications, you can instantly create a feedback loop and connect back with Ansible Tower, running Ansible, making sure that everything is in the picture. For example, let's say there is a DDoS attack happening, and you have an anomaly detector on the firewall that triggers an alarm. As soon as that happens, next thing that you would do is to trigger Ansible to make sure that those IPs are blacklisted, new load balancers are put into picture, and we increase the cluster sizing so that we handle the spike immediately. Instead of creating a ticket and letting people figure out what's happening, This kind of Ansible feedback loop makes your environment even more responsive, okay, and make sure that your systems are always up and running. So I'm telling my AI system, we can talk with it. You can literally say that, okay, trigger a pipeline for me, and it will trigger a pipeline for you. You can ask the system some information about, tell me how many environments have Ansible created, tell me how many instances I have in my environments, or how many jobs on Ansible are actually running. Okay, all of these kind of things. Going back to the applications, we can confirm that the actions are actually happening. Okay, so triggering something is a different thing, but also knowing that those actions have been triggered and they are happening right now in front of you is very important. So we'll see that indeed the pipeline has been triggered. Okay, so while the pipeline is being triggered and it is running, you can also witness that the jobs move, and behind the scenes what is happening, all these things are triggering Ansible. Okay, so deployments are happening on Ansible, using Ansible on our environments. There will be multiple applications. I'm going to show you one that we are using right now. So you have the application here for the dev. You have one application running in the stage, and mind it that Ansible does it so brilliantly. It can trigger anything that you want. So if you have any runbooks created, if you have some third-party dependencies, if you are using infrastructure from AWS or multi-cloud setup, if you have a containerization setup, okay, everything works really good with Ansible. Okay, there is no agent running, so communication issues are not there. You directly fire a command, it goes on the machine, does what it has to do, and comes back with a neat and clean report. All right, so applications are being deployed right now, and while the pipeline completes, let's say when it goes and moves through all of these stages, we expect that on Ansible Tower, it also triggers Ansible Tower as a part of the complete feedback loop and makes sure that one more job is running on Ansible Tower. So after 101, we should be able to see 103, 102, 103. Okay, if that's happened, that is brilliant. So while that is taking place, let me talk a little bit about how everything has been structured here for the demo. We are using the same playbooks as we have described on Yes Solution/Ansible roles. You can start using it, and you can use Ansible Tower. You can download it directly from Ansible website and work it out. Okay, all the Docker instances that are actually running on OpenShift right now, they are presented in the repository called Yes Solution/Docker files. You can use that Docker files also. These are actually production ready systems that we are using today for the demo. So you can go through it. When someone commits a code for infrastructure, you see infrastructure has been built as a code. We are moving far and far from the physical machines and making sure that everything is virtualized and everything is written as part of configuration file in a descriptive way, just like Ansible describes it. But when that is happening, you also need to make sure that all of these things are testable. You can test all of these things, right? So infrastructure is being first tested in the dev, then it is being tested in the stage, and then also it is being tested in production as a smoke test. Okay, so you guarantee that whatever has been written with Ansible actually is going to production in a safe way. You don't try and test things directly on production. All right, so there are pipelines, 3 different pipelines, and Ansible, as you see, Jenkins would run the code pipeline for you, and Ansible would help running the infrastructure pipeline and also the database pipeline. Here the jobs are running. Right now it is the to-do regression test that is happening, and just a seconds later it would run the deploy to production job, and we should be able to see the production service as well. Okay, so where is this useful and how is it beneficial for enterprises? Like I mentioned before, when you're using virtualized systems, when you're using containers, when you're using systems that can replicate themselves, so instead of a lead time of a month or a lead time of various different months or a couple of weeks where people spend time creating the environments, when you have descriptions ready, you can use the same descriptions replicating your environment, cutting down your times from days and months to just mere minutes. For that, when it is minutes data, when it is a minute-wise experience that is happening, you also need to make sure that your automation takes care of everything. Okay, and it doesn't go every. So it shouldn't happen that your automation is killing everything. That's why feedback loops are important, and Yeshwan helps you build those feedback loops. Now let's check here on this page if we can see the number increase. Right now it is 101 Docker cleanup, and the last job is running here on Yeshwan. The job has succeeded. If you go back to the jobs on Ansible Tower and see what's happening there, it should bump up the number. That means the feedback loop should be complete. Okay, I'll take one question. The question is, can I use Ansible Tower or an Ansible to automate ESX? Of course. See, whatever you can automate on your screen from CLI or using an API instance, you can use Ansible to do all of these things for you. Okay, so Ansible can purely automate anything and everything that you can access using your API, your CLI, and any of the physical instances that you use on your laptop as a user, right? So if as a user you can automate something, Ansible Tower should be able to automate it for you. All right, while that is happening, I will open up the call to the team at Red Hat and John so that we can discuss. This is the last part of the demo, and when we see the number bumped up, which we have actually, you see 103 has actually appeared here without any touching of Ansible Tower. So we didn't touch Ansible Tower at all. Feedback loop was completed. That means whatever events happen in your infrastructure can re-trigger another cycle of events in your infrastructure to take care of it, so that your teams never have to attend last-minute calls in night. Okay, so if something happens at 2 o'clock, your teams actually know how to fix things. They already have the runbooks. If Ansible can run those runbooks for you, that would be brilliant. And that is how Yeshwan can help assist Ansible and Ansible Tower take to the new levels. All right, any questions that we can answer?
Ashish, I think there was one question around the pricing for Ansible. Mark, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, so Ansible, obviously, with Red Hat, we have different subscription levels. So, for example, standard support gives you, 9 to 5 type of support, and then we have our premium support, which is 24/7. On top of that, Ansible is normally subscribed in the 100 nodes, 5,000 nodes, or 10,000 nodes. These are the managed nodes. You can have as many Ansible. So if you subscribe Ansible Tower, you can set up multiple Ansible Tower instances. You're not paying for the web server, you're paying for the managed nodes. And that's how all of Ansible subscriptions are managed. Now there's Ansible Engine subscriptions, Ansible Tower, and Ansible Networking, and you can get Ansible Tower with Engine as well. But it's done at the 100 node, 5,000 node, and 10,000 node level.
Okay, there's one more question coming up. The question is, can we have ESXi on physical machines automated using Ansible?
So if you're talking about, there are, in fact, a number of modules for working with VMware and ESXi. So the answer to your question is yes. In fact, we use a lot of people use Ansible to do all of that with their VMware infrastructure. Did you want us to send information? Or, sorry, go ahead.
The question is there any free tier for towers that we can try it out?
Sorry, any which, sorry?
Is there any free version for Ansible Tower that people can try out? So
Red Hat is an open source company. So all of our software is provided with an upstream open source version. So there's an AWX version that you can get. It changes daily. So you're probably better off with the trial, which you can also download. And there's like, I believe, a 30-day trial that you can install. But we do have an upstream version of our Tower product.
So if people want to use Ansible and Ansible Tower, what is the best place for them to look at? Where can they start doing all of their POCs and playing around with stuff?
So literally every distro of Linux repository contains Ansible now. So depending on which distro you're on, it's got to go on one Linux server, and it doesn't have to be a Red Hat Enterprise Linux server. But if you can do like yum-y install Ansible, or DNF-y install Ansible, or apt-get-y install Ansible, any distro, and you're going to get Ansible installed. So you can install it on any one machine that way. What I do recommend that if you want to get skilled up in Ansible is contact your Yash representative, and we'll make sure that everybody has the links that they can send you to some free Ansible training. So there's a university-sponsored course by Red Hat, well, an online university-sponsored course on Ansible and how to do automation with Ansible. There's also on Ansible.com a full set of development tutorials, free education, free training support, and packages and stuff you can download that already have stuff in it. It's a great way to start, and we can send you a link to a free ebook that you can use for Ansible as well that will help you with your basic automation. There is a ton of information. Ansible being as active as it is, everybody's been jumping on board to try and provide help for people to spin it up. But what I would recommend you do is work with your Yash compatriots to help you implement some basic Ansible stuff, because it's a really cool tool. And the best part about it is you start small. The thing that I do recommend is you don't try and do something complicated to begin with. That's what I did, and that's where I originally failed, and it wasn't until I realized Ansible's powers and its simplicity. Pick something you want to do, deploy a couple of servers, change some configuration, pull down an inventory of everything that you have on every server. You can do all those things from the command line with Ansible as a way to get started, but start with the books and links that we'll send you via Yash.
Okay, fantastic. For the enterprises who are trying to move from Ansible to Ansible Tower, where do you think they should start?
I'm not sure I understand. It's a natural migration. So essentially, start by having someone help you do it. In this case, Yash. But essentially, once you've started to write your playbooks and you've got a bunch of playbooks that are running in production that you want everybody to be able to use. So you have one administrator who's written all of your networking stuff, and that's usually what happens. You have one really smart guy in the shop that ends up writing all the playbooks for his particular domain or set of skills. So you have your networking guy who did all the stuff for the networking, and you got your DevOps guy who's done a bunch for your DevOps, and you've got your chief administrator who's written a bunch of playbooks there. When you've got some stuff in hand, when you actually have some playbooks in hand, at that point, then you bring in Tower and you would basically import all those playbooks into Tower and start working with it. That's when you really want to work with the Yash.
Fantastic. I think we have answered all the questions. Does anybody have some more questions? We have the Red Hat team here and team from Yash so that we can answer all of queries before we leave for the day. Okay, fantastic. I think that is it then. Over to you, John.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, or this morning, I guess. And thanks again to the Red Hat team for presenting an overview of Tower. And if there's any other information that you would like, we will be sending out information thanking you for attending the webinar today. And we're happy to work with you on any future things that may come up around the Red Hat products.